And welcome to this debate about Battleground Gauteng and ahead of the 2019 elections. I must just warn you though that last Tuesday, it was exactly 7 days ago, I was officiating at an event. To be precise, it was a book launch somewhere in Sandton. And it did not end very well. But if things go wrong, please don't blame me. Yeah, so we are exactly 22 days away from what many call the most crucial elections in the country's history. But as you all know, that's often a cliche in every country. Whenever the elections, people will say, this is the most critical election in the history of the country. This is the most pivotal election, and the next election, the same cliche is said. But I think this one is very much so, because we have seen in recent years, particularly in the past 5 years or so, the sands have been shifting very dramatically. And indications are that there will be some very serious shifting of the sands in this election. So I think we can very much say that it is, in our 25-year history, as a democracy, it's probably the most pivotal election that we have had. So we're 22 days away, and the people here will be burning the rubber. But another landmark, it is 22 days away, but it is also 25 days away from the day that Orlando Pirates will lift the PSL trophy. So just... yeah. So we look forward to a really lively, robust debate. We hope that it will not just be just a debate. It will be a debate that all of us will take something out of. One thing that we can be very proud of as South Africans is that we are a democracy, and we are not a sham democracy. It's a genuine democracy. It has many weaknesses, but it is a democracy that functions. And one thing that we can always say is that we will always be a democracy. Every 5 years, there will be somebody who will have been elected by the people of South Africa who would stand and take the oath. And in a very symbolic way, remind us that we are a good democracy and one that is committed to always being one. So I think once the fights are over, once the elections are over and the robustness is over, we'll still all be South Africans. I will hand over. Oh, I didn't tell you who I am, sorry. My name is Mondli Makhanya. I'm editor of City Press, and my colleague Waldimar, Pelser, editor-in-chief of Rapport.
Mondli, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here tonight. I know that there are many other things to do. This election matters to you as it does to us. An election which in Gauteng almost certainly will produce a coalition unless, of course, the current governing party in the province surprises us and bucks the polls and gets more than 50%. But all parties you see represented on stage here today are possible partners in a governing coalition in this province. So it matters a great deal where they stand on key issues. Ons glo as journaliste dat politici natuurlik altyd eerlik is, maar ons probeer hulle eerlik hou deur hierdie gesprek. So of course, these are all honest people like all politicians, but we'll try tonight to keep them honest about what they've promised in the past and how they think our most serious problems in this country can be fixed. Baie dankie dat julle almal hier is. Die gesprek sal in Engels plaasvind om so groot as moontlike gehoor te bereik. Baie dankie vir u begrip in daai verband. Net voor ons begin, a few housekeeping arrangements from my side. The restrooms or toilets are behind the bar, so please feel free to get up and walk in that direction if the need arises. There's a Wi-Fi code. The Wi-Fi is Naspers guest, and the password is internet. So please make use of that if you like. The hashtags that we'll be using tonight for the online conversation is in English, Battleground Gauteng, and the Afrikaans for some reason sounds even more violent, and that's Slagveld Gauteng. So Slag van Gauteng. So Slag van Gauteng. So please feel free to use any of these hashtags as you participate in the conversation. We'll be live streaming tonight also for the full duration duration of the debate on citypress.co.za, as well as on Netwerk 24. So please feel free to share those links with friends who are not here tonight. Okay, we'll start in a moment with an opening statement. Mondli and I are inviting each party in order of support level in Gauteng, so I'll introduce the panel to you in a moment, to make an opening statement of exactly 2 minutes about why voters in Gauteng deserve, deserve the vote of voters in Gauteng. So exactly 2 minutes for that. There's a counter at the back of the room which all the panelists can see. And we'll ask them to keep strictly to that. Following that, we'll have 1 hour exactly of questions that Mondli and I will pose, after which we'll throw the questions open to the floor. So please have your questions ready. Mondli, will you introduce the panel, and then we start with a 2-minute, or I'll do that. Okay, let me do so. The ANC is represented here tonight by Kgosientsho Ramakgopa, head of the Gauteng ANC Transformation Committee. Welcome, Mr. Ramakgopa. Thank you for being here. Also, of course, a former mayor of Tshwane, which is why he was hugging Solly Msimanga, who I'm introducing next, because they know what it's like, right? The DA's premier candidate in Gauteng, Solly Msimanga from the DA, thank you very much for joining us here tonight. The EFF is represented by Mandisa Mashego, also the party's premier candidate in Gauteng. Mandisa, welcome. Thank you for being here. The Freedom Front Plus, Anton Alberts, is the premier candidate in Gauteng. Welcome. And the IFP is represented by Bonginkosi Dlamini, provincial chair of the IFP. And these 5 parties were selected because they're all represented in the Gauteng legislature, so we didn't just draw straws. There was logic behind this, and they might all be part of governing coalitions. So starting with the ANC, 2 minutes. Why do you deserve the vote of Gauteng voters?
Thank you very much. I think in the past 25 years, we have made significant strides in improving major socio-economic indices. We have broadened the social security net. We have almost achieved universal access with regards to key basic services, water, electricity, and sanitation, which gives dignity to our people. We have improved the levels of education, the issues of literacy levels. We are beginning to ensure that post-secondary higher education is in fact free. You have seen the first seeds of ensuring that we have free higher education, rolled out the highest and most intense provision of public sector-led free housing of any sector in the world. So those are some of the significant strides we've made over a period of time. When we went to our Nazareth conference, we became aware that there's a need for us to ensure that there's a significant alteration of the economic relations of society. And if we are to benefit from the demographic dividend, we have to invest a lot in young people. And in this instance, we said, 1, we are going to ensure that we do away with monopolies, fight concentration, and ensure that there's power given to the authorities in the Competition Commission. We are going to use the fiscus to ensure that we are able to broaden procurement from small, medium enterprises. We are going on a program of aggressive land reform without undermining the provisions of the Bill of Rights with regards to property rights, but ensuring that we are addressing the legacy of the past. People, investors can only come this side if there's security, and that's why we're going to increase the visibility of law and order. And then we're going to go ahead and ensure that we attract investment of up to 1.2 trillion rands over a passage of time, reduce the requirements for first entrance into the labor market, and ensure that everyone participates in the economy.
Thank you very much. You spent your budget. You spent your budget exactly. DA, thank you very much. 2 minutes starting now. Go for it. I'll keep an eye. Thank you. Sorry, 2 minutes, not 1. Somebody's trying to take your budget away and move it to you. There we go. Thank you very much. DA.
Thank you very much, Vladimir. I think, South Africa has been regressing. We have seen things falling apart. I mean, we talk about state-owned entities that have now on the verge of collapse if they haven't collapsed. More than 1 in 3 young people in Gauteng are not employed, and they're increasingly becoming more unemployable. We are now losing investment instead of attracting investment, which is the core if you want to talk about building an economic viable society. We have regressed actually when it comes to education. If you were to compare with the rest of the world, we are actually doing far worse. When it comes to issues of literacy, when it comes to issues of numeracy, we are actually regressing, which is something that is of great concern and needs to be addressed as a matter of urgency. So what we are proposing is that there are 5 key elements that we are proposing. One is that we are saying that no investor wants to come and invest in a country or in a province where they themselves as people and the properties are not going to be safe. So we are calling for an honest and professional police service. That's number 1. Number 2, we are talking about ensuring that you have an economic upliftment where you are able to then cut corruption, where you are able to then, cut red tape, and then you roll out the red carpet, where you are able to then attract investment into your province and into your cities. We are also now talking about ensuring that going forward you have better service, a coordinated better service delivery between the provincial and local governments, because there's a disjunction, a disjointment between what happened at the provincial level and what happened at the local level. So we are saying in order for you to have a bigger impact in terms of service delivery, you need to have a coordinated effort in terms of what happened at the provincial and the local level. The last thing that we're also now talking about is to ensure that we move towards ensuring that we eradicate social ills, and that starts with dealing with the issues of drug and substance abuse, which I think for me needs to be receiving the greatest of attention that we need to be dealing with going forward. The last thing, and I think this is a discussion that the broader South Africa needs to have, is our porous borders. How do we then deal with the porous borders? We are not anti people coming here, but we are saying people must come here in a manner that is legal and can be accounted for.
Okay, thank you very much. The DA has overspent its budget slightly, but we'll try and get it back from you at the next opportunity. Mandisa Mashego of the EFF, your 2 minutes start now.
I think it's very important, firstly, to acknowledge that the African National Congress cannot claim to fix problems that they created in the first place. And then secondly, himself, Ramokgopa and Soli, they are 2 failed mayors of 1 metro. I think their party should have reconsidered the decision to deploy them here. Nonetheless, the EFF, over and above the land expropriation without compensation policy, which we will drive through changing the Constitution, Section 25 of the Constitution, which the ANC and other progressive political parties accepted in Parliament, over and above making sure that we police implementation of that act. The radical aspect of our economic policies and all the things that we say we are going to do is the one thing that differentiates us. The second thing that differentiates us is that not just in our manifesto, but all our actions say so. We want to prioritize economic empowerment of black women particularly, as well as the economic empowerment of black youth, secondly, or maybe altogether. That is not to say that we leave out black men, of course, we can't. But the reality is that the inequalities that are close to the lowest level of inequality, or rather the highest level of inequality that you could get in the world, we achieved it in South Africa because we didn't do proper empowerment. We didn't do proper empowerment of black people. We did BEE, which empowers one person in one company to get billions of rands worth of shares, which they don't even own in reality because it's debt. And so we need to move away from that. We're going to empower communities. We're going to empower workers. We're going to make sure that government employs capable people. We're going to capacitate the state internally and remove the dependency on the tender system, remove the dependency on labor broking, which is extremely corrosive to all our black communities and doesn't put money in the pockets of black workers. So our policy framework is dependent and premised on those core factors.
Thank you very much. Freedom Front Plus is the next biggest party in the legislature. Advocate Anton Alberts, your 2 minutes start now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, after 25 years of misrule, the ANC has brought us to a fiscal cliff, brought us to a place where we are going to implement ludicrous policies like expropriation without compensation, and where our economy will be completely destroyed and it must be stopped. And therefore, the ANC must be removed from government, and we must create a stable coalition government to replace them. The Freedom Front Plus wants to bring a message of hope and stability to the people, especially people of Gauteng. We believe there's a path out of our troubles. Especially on hope, we believe there is a path of hope whereby a coalition government in Gauteng can take over. A coalition government can be formed by opposition parties, reasonable opposition parties. The Freedom Front Plus is the 3rd largest opposition party in Gauteng, and it looks like we're going to grow, and we will play a role in that regard. So there's hope to get out of this place. We also want to bring stability. We already showed that in Johannesburg and in Tshwane, Pretoria, that we are a force of stability. Solly has seen, you know, when we supported him in Tshwane, that we are there to support the coalition government at all odds and to make sure that the ANC doesn't come back. And we will do this by implementing our policies as well when we co-govern. We want to ensure that there is a devolution of power down to communities, especially community councils. We want to see that the police force is strengthened and better training takes place. We want to protect the free market and enhance the free market to create jobs. And we also wanted to bring merit back into the marketplace and take race out of the marketplace by taking out BEE, that's just a pathway to looting. We also want to make sure that diversity is protected by including minority rights and a focus on minority rights, because we see that there is a consistent attack against minorities by the EFF and by the ANC, and in practice and in policy. And we want to be their protector in Gauteng, but also nationally.
Okay, just about on budget. Thank you very much, Freedom from Plus. And then lastly, Bonginkosi Dlamini of the IFP. Your 2 minutes start now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and the audience. Why the people of Gauteng must trust the IFP to vote for it? One is that out of all the parties that are here and represented, the part that you can trust is the IFP, and the record speaks for itself. The IFP is not a party that recycles corrupt officials. We don't recycle corrupt officials. We deal with them, we fire them, as we did in the GRA about 2 days ago, because we are heading the transport department here in Gauteng, in the city of Johannesburg. And don't ignore the IFP at your peril. We are a growing party in Gauteng. In 2014, there were 9 parties before elections. Only 5 came back, and IFP is one of them. In 2016, we became kingmakers in 3 metros, in Ekurhuleni, Johannesburg, and Mohale City. Therefore, South Africa has all in place. We've got policies, we've got programs. All you need is honest politicians to implement in the interest of the people. The IFP is saying, you vote for us because we're not masters of the people, but we are servants of the people who respect voters. That is why we don't tolerate corrupt politicians. And our record speaks for itself. We are pragmatic politicians. We are not arrested in isms. We take what works. Therefore, we are not married to isms where you want to experiment with things that have failed in other countries. We take what works and what is practical. Therefore, support the IFP, vote for the IFP in Gauteng, because when you've got the IFP, you are sure that your money will be respected and no politician. And we are worried that some of the parties, even in the panel, are fast learning corruption. They are fast learning corruption from the ANC. Therefore, the IFP will never tolerate corruption, but will respect political rights. And lastly, we are opening the debate about regional powers, more especially provincial powers. All of us in Gauteng are now victims of national policy where e-tolls were imposed on us. And when the IFP called for a federal state of government, people said what we wanted a confederation. We didn't want that. We wanted a federal system of government like all other countries that are developing. You devolve power to them down where the people are.
Thank you very much. That was opening statements from all 5 parties. The first question of the evening goes to Mondli.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, there are various issues that come up in every single poll that are like top of the minds of voters and on top of the minds of the citizens of South Africa. And one of them relates to a movie that we've been watching over the past 5 months in the various commissions that have been that have been taking place. I think it's 4 commissions that have been looking at various aspects. And that issue is corruption. It's a fascinating movie, but a very depressing movie. And it's one of the issues that I'd like all the parties to deal with before we move on to the other top issues. But I'd like every party to deal with corruption. But the question is, we know that people will go to jail. That some people will have to repay money and so on and so on. But the question is, what will you do? Whether you are the government, whether you are in a coalition government, or whether you are in the opposition, what will your party do to make sure that we do not go back to the nightmare that we've just come from? May I start? Are you on the right or you're on the audience's left? Sorry, the most left-wing party.
I think we're a centre party now. If we look at the placement of political parties today in their ideologies, look, we've got to fix the criminal justice system, and we have to appoint people on merit. We have to make sure that we have the best advocates who work in a national prosecuting authority that can do the work, and we must give them the political space within which they can work. So far, we've seen political interference over and over again, and that's why people are not prosecuted. And I have to question whether anyone senior will ever be prosecuted within our political environment that we're in right now. So the small people might go to jail, but they'll take the fall for the big guys. And that's very unfortunate. We have to be equal before the law. So we have to ensure that we appoint the best people. We have to give the people who are out there who are practicing law right now in private practice salaries that they can come into the prosecuting authority and that they can prosecute without sphere of intervention by the politicians in any way whatsoever. And we must also strengthen the police force because their investigative abilities have been broken down over years. So we must strengthen that as well and make sure that they are supported so that the evidence line from the police force's investigation right through the NPA is supported and right into court, that there is a very strong line of evidence that cannot be refuted by the defense. And then we make sure that those people actually go to jail and are not released earlier, like Shabir Sheikh, who's something wrong with him. I'm not sure what that would be, but playing golf at the same time. If we don't do that, we will not have accountability in our country, and people will just keep on doing what they're doing. We will not have change. Thank you.
Lies with the National Prosecutions Authority, with the South African Police Service's investigative capacity, and with the independence of both the police and the NPA from political interference. So the EFF is very clear on what needs to happen with the NPA. They need to report directly to Parliament. They cannot continue reporting to political heads at the Department of Justice, because that's where the biggest problem lies. The second thing is that the NPA has got a tendency of recycling. I'm not sure whether they misunderstood the development aspect of developing young prosecutors, but a lot of the black prosecutors are recycled from court to court and are not given an opportunity to become experts on certain case matters and also to do their work thoroughly. So we are going to focus heavily on the appointment of new additional prosecutors, as well as upskilling and training the existing ones, but also making sure that they specialize in certain cases and they also specialize in certain specialized courts, and they spend a lot of time there so that they can also have career development. It's a common fact that black prosecutors are highly discriminated against throughout the criminal justice system. The same happens in the police. The cadre deployment policy of the ANC has brought a lot of corruption in the police. We get complaints month in, month out from the police that people get parachuted by ANC politicians into the police service, claiming to have been former MK this and that, and then they get promoted. All of that leads us to a lot of corruption. But one of the biggest things that we want to deal with in terms of managing corruption is to make sure that citizens are educated about what is the process when I open a case at a police station, what are my rights, what am I entitled to, and what should not happen. And so we need to strengthen other frameworks such as the Public Protector and the Independent Police Investigative Directorate. Most citizens don't even know where the IPID is. They don't even know where to get hold of them. And when they do get hold of them, they allow IPID to mess them around and say, no, we can't investigate this police station or this station commander. So the whole process of managing and reducing corruption, in fact, not managing it, is by strengthening the entire framework of the criminal justice system. But a big part of that also involves hiring, at least in Gauteng, we've calculated there's a shortage of in excess of 40,000 police officers across police stations. And also the police stations that are there are not enough, Mondli, and the ones that are there are badly run down. Police vehicles are all stuck in some kind of warehouse, when we've got a company called G Fleet owned by the state that can actually affordably fix police vehicles with a short turnaround time. But also the biggest thing is we need police officers to be on the ground. We need them to be on the ground on foot, and we need the specialist investigators to focus on corporate and commercial crimes, because that's where the largest activities of corruption take place.
Yeah, so my view is that corruption is a manifestation of failure of leadership. I think there's an indirect correlation. The weaker the leadership is, the greater is corruption. So it's going to thrive. So we are going to create conditions for corruption to thrive. That's the first one. The second one is that corruption has got a disproportionate impact on the poor, because the poor rely on the fiscals, on social services for their well-being. So in fact, you are penalizing the poor as a result of corruption. The third area, we are of the opinion that we must hold ourselves to higher values. So it mustn't just be about the absence of corruption, but it's about good leadership, committing to genuine progressive values that whose intention are to achieve an egalitarian society. But at a more practical level, the first thing that needs to be done is that there has to be a concerted effort to support and strengthen the foundations of our democracy by ossifying Chapter 9 institutions. So the issues around SARS, you can see there's work that has been done there by the President, strengthening the powers of the Auditor General, so that he must not only make finding, but he must go beyond and ensure that where there's fruitless, wasteful expenditure, there's an ability to prosecute, obviously directing it to the right authorities. We can see now the action that has been taken at the level of the National Prosecuting Authority. What gets to be exposed or surfaced at the Zondo Commission, it was that there was a systematic, orchestrated and deliberate attack on these foundations of democracy. So we're beginning to dismantle that. And the last one is that people must go to jail, irrespective of their hierarchy. And my view is that for you, the best indication of your ability, your quest and resolve to fight corruption is to start at the top. So those that are found guilty, and we applaud the President that in fact there's a special dispensation that has been created for the prosecution of those characters. They belong to jail, and we must hold ourselves to higher values and higher morals going forward.
Thank you very much, Mondli. I think, you know, if you were to listen to what has been said, especially in the Zondo Commission, you realize that what has been happening in the last few years in South Africa has been a systematic drive to collapse those institutions that are actually supposed to be helping us in terms of driving or rooting out corruption and making sure that those are actually found to be corrupt are actually arrested and actually prosecuted. If you were to look at the Scorpions at the height, had a 98% success rate. And when we look at what has happened since then, you realize that we have over 600 cases, equating to over 11 billion rand, and there's never even been a single prosecution that has taken place, or successful prosecution that has taken place. Then that tells you that there is a problem right there where it needs to be implemented properly. But I think also the issue about how do we then capacitate the policemen and women that we have, and this is what I was referring to when I spoke about having an honest and professional police service. But I think it goes beyond that to make sure that we are able to ensure that we get rid of the rotten apples within the South African police service. We are able to then ensure that we have specialized units that are also going to be looking at some of these issues that are bugbear, to society. One being special and organized crime. Two, being, this gang crimes that are taking place on a daily basis. But also you need to have a unit that is also just focusing on intelligence. South Africa, I think, doesn't have the intelligence that it needs to be able to then do preventative combating of crime going forward. I think that's something that needs to be looked at. And also I think the way that our cases have, or the cases have been handled and been, from the time that somebody's been arrested to the time that somebody is actually appearing before a magistrate or a judge, I think there is something that is very, very much lacking in there that needs to be strengthening in terms of the processes that are also now being used in that particular system. But lastly, I think society needs to get involved. Right now, I don't think that there is much confidence between the government, the judicial system, and the society in general. I think this is something that we now need to then also rebuild and say, how do we then get the moral compass up again, so that we can all say that not in my name, because if we are going to corrupt, if we're going to allow corruption to be the order of the day, then we're not going to be moving as people going forward. I think this is something that we now need to look at going forward.
Oh, thank you. I think we must acknowledge as South Africa that when it comes to corruption, we're not dealing with individuals anymore. It has been institutionalized. That's fact. Therefore, we need to clean the whole system, irregardless of which individual are there. But what worries the IFP is that, as Usole has said, nobody has been arrested for it because it is institutionalized in such a way that it is also self-protecting within the system, as we are seeing it now, playing itself in the Zondo Commission. Therefore, as the IFP was saying, one, we need to professionalize our security, our police force. Make sure that we professionalize them, we train them properly, and we pay them well, so that we are then able to de-unionize them, so that you don't have comrades as policemen there. You need people who are professional who will be able to do the work regardless of who is involved. Secondly, I think South Africans must really learn that in the first 10 years of our democracy, we had a government of unity, and there was, the corruption was less because you did not put all your eggs into one basket. But after 2009, when the ANC got absolute power, they had, and you know that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And once you have a government that can give you everything, that government has a possibility of taking everything from you. Therefore, it is time that now, for us to fight corruption as citizens, we must demonstrate on the 8th by reducing the power of those who are too powerful, to make sure that there are checks and balances. My biggest worry as the IFP is that even in coalition governments, instead of us really working together as so-called opposition parties to fight corruption, we are learning so much to adapt to this institutionalized corruption, and it is really worrying. So for the IFP, it's one, professionalize the police. Second, create and establish specialized commercial courts and crime courts, so that you shorten the period between the person being arrested and convicted and serving in jail. And secondly, we must stop this thing of really making our jail 5-star. Because if you compare our prisons and our hospitals, our patients don't have TVs and luxuries, but your guys in jail, they've got everything that they need. So there is no punishment. That is why the IFP is calling for the debate, and don't misquote the IFP, open the debate on the possibility of the death penalty. Because there are people who don't deserve to live after doing horrible things in our country. Therefore, corruption has become a cancer in our society. It is robbing the poor. South Africa is not a poor country. We are, in fact, here in Gauteng, we are within the top 5 of the top African economies. But investors are afraid to come in here because, one, there is corruption. Secondly, there is no policy centered in our country. And I think we've got that responsibility to have a policy centered so that no government can create jobs. The job of the government is to make an environment conducive for people to create jobs. Therefore, when we fight corruption, it's not only in the public sector, it is also in the private sector. Third, lastly, there's too much room for corruption in South Africa because you've got more than 714 SOEs. You don't need those states. What do you need? I mean, that's where the ground for corruption is. Therefore, we need to really privatize some of these things because we don't need them. Because it's not the job of government to run businesses, but it's the job of government to make sure that it makes the business thrive, and its job is to regulate between the capital and the labor so that there is no exploitation. So corruption has become institutionalized, and as the IFP, we are saying, for you to be able to deal with it, let us clean the whole system. Lastly, let us not allow.
Many lastlies in the IFP.
Yeah. I think we're done there. Thank you, Bungi.
Okay.
If I may just follow up, I think to the ANC, I want to say that it's clear all the opposition parties on the stage are very keen to enter into coalition agreements with you, because none of them has laid the blame for all the corruption of the last 5 years at your door. All of the corruption that has been described here tonight happened under ANC rule. Why must voters believe that the new ANC administration will do anything differently?
Well, it will be a height of folly to deny that corruption did thrive under our watch. So that's the first admission, so we are together. And that's why when we went to Yes, familiarity with the facts is important to enter into a constructive conversation. So I'm not in the denial mode. So that's the first part. So we've resolved that question. The second one, the reason why we went to the 54th National Conference and we themed it renewal was an admission on the part of the ANC that we have wronged our people, the poor in particular, through our conduct, the manner in which the state has conducted itself. And in fact, some elements, some of them in key positions, both in the state and in the organization, that in fact they've stole from the people. And in fact, it's an antithesis of what the ANC is about. It's a tangent with the values of the ANC. It's a misarticulation of the kind of future that we want to construct. So the best thing to do is that you must self-correct. And then that's why we arrived at organizational renewal. The Comrade Ramaphosa ascending to the throne is not by mistake. It was as a result of a popular discontent of the general public and also branches of the African National Congress to say that we need a new direction. And when President Ramaphosa took to the podium, he then articulated what I call a new paradigm, a way of doing things, what he chose to call the new dawn. And he says, in the context of doing new things, we need to galvanize the whole of society around Tumamina. So the point I'm making is that we are committed to that. The Zondo Commission is surfacing all of that. There is no political party that I can think of in the world that on the eve of an election can institute a commission that in fact is investigating it. And in fact, it represents a subtraction with regards to our electoral prospects. So there is no better commitment that you can find other than the leadership under the stewardship of President Ramaphosa.
A response here from the EFF. EFF?
You asked
Thank you,
the
thank you.
ANC how they would self-correct and why and how people would actually find it credible that they could actually do that. I want to explain to this gentleman that you are way beyond, you are incorrigible as a political party. You are beyond self-correction, and I'll give you two small examples why I'm saying so. I opened a case of fraud and corruption against David Makura and Barbara Creasy for the mess they created in that department. It's not even a department, I don't know what it is. Kispaza shop nyana sa Makura called e-government, which was even illegally established initially in 2013 until the EFF arrived and we raised the issue that the department is illegally established. We opened a case of corruption. The case is with the Hawks and we have compelling evidence that they looted a lot of money through a program where they sent young people to Europe to tour for a week under the guise of giving them artificial intelligence skills. Who can learn artificial intelligence skills in 1 week? And those students didn't even pass by a university. Number two, and the last example that I want to demonstrate, and there's many, there's millions, from your ward councillors to PR councillors to MPLs to MMCs, MECs, ministers, deputies, MPs in the ANC, corruption has reached proportions that are just irreversible. What's his name? Cyril Ramaphosa himself is guilty of illicit financial flows and tax theft through his Shanduka shares at these Lonmin Shanduka shares. And if you want evidence of that, go and check one of the professors at Wits, who was one of the people studying what has happened with Lonmin and Shanduka and what led to the 34 miners being shot down and killed at Marikana. His company called Shanduka took more than R1 billion from our minerals in Marikana to offshore investments in Bermuda. And that is a fact. It's not an allegation. I've repeated it several times. If Ramaphosa thinks that I'm lying about what I'm saying by now, he should have contested it. So I'm saying, if corruption in the ANC exists today as I'm sitting here, to that extent, what makes you think that they are going to do? How can you tell the person whose hand is deep in the cookie jar, please come and correct yourself? And how are you going to correct yourself? And how must the rest of us believe what you're saying about them? They're not going to do it. They're wasting our time.
Thank you very much, Mandisa. With Mondli's permission, we agreed on two big issues to start with. The one was corruption and the other one was jobs. To the DA, what will be the first thing that you do, the first obstacle that you remove that will allow more jobs to be created in Gauteng?
Well, thank you very much, Vladimir. I think, Winston Churchill coins it very nicely where he says, no nation has ever taxed its people to prosperity. One, we need to be able to then ensure that more people have more money into their pockets. Economics 101. If more people have money in their pockets, the more they will be demanding for goods and services, the more they will be able to then ensure that you're able to attract suppliers, which then will create more jobs. That's number one. I'm saying within the first 100 days, we are going to institute an intergovernmental dispute between provincial and national government, where we are saying we must do away with e-tolls. The second thing we are saying is that we now need to make sure that the regressive laws that are there are actually, and that are hindering in terms of attracting investment into Gauteng, are actually done away with, so that we are able to then roll out the red carpet and ensure that you're able to then attract businesses into Gauteng, and you are able to then fund smaller businesses that will then begin to blossom in order for you to be able to then create the jobs that are needed. The third thing that I think is very much important to do is that government needs to be able to be showing that it's spending money where it needs to attract investment. How you fix your roads, how you ensure that public transport is working the way that it's supposed to be functioning. Also, how do we then change the apartheid spatial planning from having people living on the peripheries of the economic activities and having the economic activities closer to where people are living. We're tired of a situation where a gogo has to leave or a mama has to leave Hammanskraal at 4 o'clock in the morning only to arrive at work at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. And the same president gets on the train and is shocked that the train is not working the way that it's supposed to be working. So let us fix all those things so that going forward, we are able to ensure that all the attributes that get the economy going are put in place. And that's how we're going to get the jobs in Gauteng.
Yeah, Mandisa, your party has been accused, your party's policies have been accused of, have been blamed for basically being very investor unfriendly, it's getting away investment, I think the whole debate about land and basically, and the very strong anti-business sentiment that you find coming through. But you have to create jobs, and jobs are not going to be created by nationalizing mines and nationalizing everything under the sun. Just practically, I mean, if we have this 27% unemployment in this country, and within the next 5 years, in this province, what practical steps will an EFF government or an EFF in a coalition?
Firstly, let me clarify that from a governance point of view and the structure of government, the EFF does not want the existence of provinces because they are wasteful. They've proven to be extremely wasteful. They've proven to be a drawback to service delivery. Just look at human settlements and the mess that Mashatile put us in here in Gauteng with human settlements, with Mamabulo, and the latest guy, what's his name, Uhuru. None of them knows what's happening in that department because that department, for instance, as an example, 20% of the staff of human settlements are qualified in civil works or engineering or anything that is required for you to be able to work in a department that is responsible for infrastructure such as housing. But your comments, Mondli, I don't blame you for thinking that nationalization will not produce jobs. I can't blame you. And I can't blame even the people because this country has been colonized for 376 years. And this country, the majority, 40 million odd Africans, indigenous Africans of this country, are used to being slaves. So once you get used to being a slave and somebody wants to liberate you or wants to show you the path to liberation, I think it was Harriet Tubman who said, I could have freed 1,000 more slaves if only they knew that they were slaves. So it's fine, I understand, and we accept, we can't be defensive. But what we want to assure you is that if the EFF was investor unfriendly, we would not be talking about the things that we want to do to curb crime. Because let me tell you, no investor, not even yourself, if you were a local billionaire, would you want to invest more money than the bare necessity you could in a country with the levels of crime that we have. We want to prepare the country for proper, progressive investors who want to create jobs for Africans and want to create jobs for African women and want to create jobs for African young people, because me and you can sit here and joke about it, but the reality is that my cousins, your cousins, my aunts, my uncles and your uncles are sitting in the townships and in the rural areas languishing in poverty No amount of private investment has created jobs over the last 10 years to the extent that we require. I hear my friend from the IFP saying they want to privatize everything. I've got news for him. Not even the US Reserve Bank, it's called the Central Bank in America. They don't call it the Reserve Bank, is privately owned. Not even 1% of the central bank in the US is privately owned. They might give you the impression because neoliberals and imperialists are very good at creating certain impressions. Number two, the Chinese economy is run by both the state and private entities, right? On a socialist program which the Chinese have planned 300 years ahead, and they are not going to change it, they are not moving from it. But the American government, American capitalists, Apple, Nike, American capitalist businesses that are operating globally are doing business in China. So there's this fear-mongering that comes from these guys here on my right that has been created by certain segments of the white population, because let me tell you, it's not the entire white population that has this mentality. I don't even understand why the Freedom Front Plus wants to take poor Afrikaners and take them to this doom and gloom mentality, because Afrikaners themselves, more than any other grouping of white people, know that they were taken out of poverty by nationalization. They were taken out of poverty by free education. They were taken out of poverty by the state establishing research development institutions. They were taken out of poverty by the state investing in critical sectors such as property, financial sector, and other sectors. Now, today, because it's black people who want to empower other black people, we must be told that nationalization is some nonsensical policy. We must be told that investing in the education of a black child is nonsense. We must be told that we are just a bunch of lunatics who don't know what we're doing. Let me tell you something. We are going to give free economic tax zones to companies who want to come on board with our policies, who want to industrialize, who want to develop small-scale mining activity around all these mines that the ANC cronies, through their BE deals and their white friends, have deserted. That we want to create small-scale farming and agro-processing. By the way, all these commercial white farmers were funded by the state. Commercial white farmers today are the first ones to complain about not having a subsidy. Why? Because that's what the ANC did to them when they came in. They took away agricultural subsidies from commercial white farmers as soon as they came into government, which they used to get during apartheid. Now, we must not give black farmers those things.
Yeah, it sounds very nice, just like all Marxist ideologies and utopias. But we know that Marxism leads to oppression, and we can only see a future where the Marxists take over, and if they do take over, that we will have a situation where free trade is oppressed, and eventually freedom of expression is suppressed, and eventually democracy is suppressed until there's only one party. And we've seen that in all communist countries. There is no exception to that rule. Even China. The ANC follows China's development policy, or developmental state policy, and it works in China because a lot of the Chinese people are working like slaves, even not earning anything or earning very, very small wages. And corruption is not tolerated. So when a state entity does business and anybody performs corruption, then they get a death penalty and they are killed. So those people are quite disciplined. And that's why China works, but it works on the back of a very oppressive, hidden policy system. And we must not delude ourselves that that cannot happen to South Africa, and that's not what we want. The very fact that we are here today, where we have 27% of unemployment, is due to the ANC's policies that keep out massive investment in South Africa. I sit on the Trade and Industry Committee in Parliament, and when we were discussing the new version of the BEE bill, we were informed by the European Union Chamber of Commerce, as well as the American Chamber of Commerce, that there were a couple of trillion US waiting to be invested in South Africa, but that they would not invest it unless they stopped the bill. Well, of course, the ANC wouldn't listen. They did not stop the bill, and none of that money came into South Africa. It went into other parts of Africa and other parts of the world. So we would have been able to deal with the unemployment problem with a free market system had the ANC not been standing in its way. So it's disingenuous for the EFF to say that must now be fixed by actually standing even furthermore in the way of the free market system and to make sure that the government owns anything. And we must also not delude ourselves, because when they talk about expropriation without compensation of property, we must look at Section 25. Section 25 talks about all types of property, not only land. So when they change that, they can take anything. They can take your pension fund, they can take your intellectual property, your patents, and they can even take your cats and your dogs. Now, who will want to invest in a country where this is the going policy? So if a company comes to South Africa in the SEZ zone that the EFF has created, how will they be certain that the EFF won't come to them and say, thank you for building this nice factory, now we want it and we take it? Because under the EFF, nobody will own anything. Julius Malema, as the head of the state, will own everything. And that is the danger, and we must stop them.
Okay.
DA and then you. Sorry, and then you.
Okay. Let's move 1, 2, 3. If I may just ask, because at some point we will want to go to the audience, if we could be just very truncated in terms of...
I just want to share with you that the state has got two potent instruments at its disposal. The first one is policy determination, and the second one is the use of the fiscus. Let me talk about policy determination. So we are proposing that for you to be able to attract investment, and we are talking about 1.2 trillion over a period of 4 years, you need, amongst others, to create incentives, and those incentives includes, but not limited to, the creation of tax holidays. So that's the first one. The second one is that the state must contribute towards the provision of bulk infrastructure to accelerate those investments. And the third one is that there must be alignment of planning cycles. So you find out that municipalities are on a different planning cycle, province and national are at a different planning cycle. So it is important that you are able to align those. Again, at the level of policy determination, we say that you must be able to break monopolies so that you are able to create what we call solidarity industries, solidarity economies in the form of cooperatives so that they are able to thrive and they benefit the many. That's the nature of cooperatives. Their primary intention is not profit maximization, but is to ensure that there's social relief. And then the second and the last one is about the spending power of the state. So that's something that is at the disposal of the state outside the policy instruments. Let me give you a practical example. We're building a number of houses, and I'm talking low-cost houses. So we know that there are two primary inputs into a housing. The first is bricks and mortar. The second one is windows and door frames. So as part of ensuring that you in fact set aside, you ring-fence the procurement of this from local industries, and then you are able to rejuvenate many of industrial parks that are located in the townships. And in that way, you are able to achieve what we call the township revitalization. So it's about the exploitation of those two, our spending power, ensuring that a minimum of 30% is procured from this solidarity to grow solidarity economies, and ensure that to create policy instruments to attract the 1.2 trillion over a period of 4 years.
I advised Mondli, sir, the last time to say never ever use examples where you haven't done your proper research. One, you talk about, they used to use Venezuela as an example, West, that you can use. Now she's using China, West, when it comes to, China's got the West when it comes to human rights, and especially when it comes to labor. They are the West when it comes to that. Now, you cannot then talk about emancipation of a black child, yet at the same time, you want to use the same instruments that are enslaving people somewhere else. It's not going to work. So that is number one. Number two, I think where we need to get the economy going and where we need to get the jobs going is policy, policy, policy. Policy certainty, policy certainty, policy certainty. Who wants to come and invest in a country where we're not sure whether we're going back or we're coming back or we're going forward? Who wants to come and invest where you say, I'm not sure whether I want to give you land or I don't want to give you land? People want to say, I want to put R1 billion there. But once I put 1 billion rand there, I want to know that my billion is still protected. I don't want to put 1 billion rand there and people in red berets go and break my doors and say, you will employ so many people or else we're taking over this factory. I'm talking about something that happened in BMW quite recently. I'm not talking about theory. I'm talking about something that is practical, that is happening. Now, who would want to come and invest in a country where these kind of things are happening? But let me also talk about the policies that unfortunately had been introduced by the ANC that has ensured that South Africa's markets become vulnerable. Right now, we're having free for all. Very, very cheap imports that are brought in while we're having people that are producers here are not being supported, even by government itself. Go to Orlando West. I'll give a typical example. There is a company in Orlando West that is making piping, the electricity piping that you have, this white piping that you have there. But when you ask them how much procurement do you get from government, they say, no, we don't. We're not getting. We're actually even selling out of South Africa. Because here, the RDP houses which are built, social housing that is being developed here, we are not getting our share from there, where we should actually be getting our share and growing the economy. But what we do, and this is something that I think we need to deal with here in South Africa, is that we've created what we call middle people. So what we do have is people who come here, get a contract, go to China, buy a whole lot of containers of stuff that they're bringing here, add a profit margin and then sell. Tomorrow when the same people are not able to get jobs from government, what they do is they go broke. What we now need to be doing is to incentivize those that are producers, so that once you are able to then produce and sell to government or even sell to the private entity, your business will be able to then survive. I think that's what we need to be talking about. And even when you're talking about the 30%, the 30% should be that when you start with the 30% is to say, I'm giving you a startup. That startup is to ensure that you are able to then build a base from which you should then be a producer and come out of the system so that we can then broad empower others. That's when we talk about real empowerment of the people. And I think that's where we need to be moving as South Africans. Thank you.
Thank you, Makhanya. I think I agree with both the ANC and the IFP, and the DA on the issue of policy certainty. Nobody will invest where there is no policy certainty. We need policy certainty, that's one. Secondly, we need to have a working infrastructure, people that can really rely on it. That is why the IFP, my friend Mondli, it's really for breaking of monopolies. We have been victim of a big monopoly which is called Eskom, because without Eskom, it's the only supply of electricity. We must break that monopoly so that there's competition and they will start to respect other people. There must be other players at that place. So that alone will make investors be sure that there is enough electricity supply, therefore they can invest in our country. So for us, it's policy certainty, it's infrastructure that is working and reliable. Thirdly, it's a transparent public fiscal management of our places, because when people make money and they pay their taxes, they must see that it's transparent, it's free, and everybody knows that their money does not go to waste. And lastly, as I said before, I didn't say all SOEs must be. I said some of them, we don't need them. There are those that are really useless. We must close them down. They are not government business, and we're not apologetic about it. We're not apologetic about it. Therefore, secondly, we agree that there is a certain a role for the state to play in making sure that it uplifts those who were oppressed for the last 300 years. Therefore, anyone who is against blacks being, those who were oppressed by apartheid being uplifted, really is ingenious. I mean, he's not talking the truth. He's not helping us to build South Africa. Therefore, there is a limited state to play to make sure that you uplift those who were oppressed before they were, because before apartheid, in apartheid days, there were a deliberate effort to exclude black people and empower white people. Therefore, that is why the IFP is also saying, in creating jobs now, you are sitting with a force job seekers who are between the ages of 24 to 49, who were victims of apartheid and the 25 years of the mismanagement of the ANC, who does not possess any skill. What do you do with those? They are not ready for the fourth industrial revolution. We need to identify economic sectors now who will absorb them, because they are here now as a problem currently. Lastly, the issue of our borders. our president became unpopular when he was the Minister of Home Affairs when he spoke about closing our borders, because the fact of the matter is that it was not all South Africans who were in exile, it was just a very small number. And we're not saying, we are not being xenophobic, we are being realistic. Let us guard our borders. The army must go back and guard our borders. People must come in legally so and be documented. And lastly, municipalities must be given powers to, yes, municipalities must be given powers to be able to register and take certain functions of home affairs. Because in developed countries, that is what is happening. So, as the IFP were very...
okay, you have exhausted your last
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to speed things. We want to, with the permission of the IFP, speed things up a little bit before we get to questions from the audience. So short answers, please. I want to ask each panelist to answer very, very briefly why it is that only the EFF has raised the changing of Section 25 of the Constitution here tonight, and only the EFF in this province uses the issue of land as their key election message on their posters, starting with the IFP, DA, then ANC, and then Freedom Fund Plus. Why do you not put it on your posters?
The issue of land has economic, spiritual, and economic connotations. Therefore, we must deal with it very carefully, because what makes you as a sovereign, as a country, it's your land and your sky and your waters. Therefore, that commodity, you can't make it, devalue it. So we must deal with it in such a way. The IFP agrees with expression of land, but with a certain compensation, because you must make it have a value. Because if given land was a silver bullet, Zimbabwe will not be in South Africa.
Thank you, DA.
We have said time and time again that the people should be the real owners. People should be owners in their own right. Government should not be owner of land. People should own in their own right. And this is why practically we've started saying where people are owners, or even people where they're supposed to be benefiting, you create beneficiaries. Let me give you a typical example. If you go to the northwest now to Bafokeng, the Bafokeng tribe is able to send their learners or their residents to school. They're able to benefit out of the mine that is there. If you are to make people the owners, then state doesn't have a right to remove, like what the apartheid government did. It was able to forcibly remove people from where they were settled because people didn't have ownership. And now this is what they're proposing. And if we allow that to happen, believe you me, somebody can wake up one day and say everybody in Santen needs to move. So there's nothing wrong with what is in the Constitution. Section 25 allows for that to happen. I'm saying instead of concentrating on rhetoric, let's get people empowered, let's get people working, let's get people being owners of the land that they find themselves on.
Thank you. So even the ANC does not have it on posters, but has Cyril Ramaphosa's face on the posters instead.
No, it's an unfortunate measure that you only look at the poster, the punchline on the poster, and you think that is exhaustive. I think you must make time to read the manifesto. It's a comprehensive articulation of what we represent. And there's a chapter here in the manifesto on page 30. It's a whole chapter that deals with the land. The primary question, the underlying conflict in this country is race and is a land question. And in the manner in which we interact with land is not only around primary production, but it's about creating new asset classes to allow people to participate in the mainstream economy. So when you talk about land in an urban setting like Gauteng, densely populated, the smallest land mass, the conversation is different. It's not about primary production, but it's about creating new asset classes. And that's why we have started the project of rapid land release. That's how we are going to do it. There must be a method. It mustn't be arbitrary, because it represents a misarticulation of a future that we want to construct. And that's why the ANC is deliberate, almost scientific in the manner in which we are engaging with the land question.
Why are we being skipped?
No, we'll come back to you.
Okay.
So asking why is it only
on the
you?
land question.
You have it.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
We did mention land before, Section 25, changing of the Constitution. Land is important, but it's not the only factor to create wealth and prosperity for people. You have to look at the big picture. And, you know, if you look at a country like Singapore, which is a city-state, there's not much land there, but it's one of the richest countries in the world. So we must look at what really creates wealth. And there's a lot to say about intellectual property, about Silicon Valley, and how wealth is being transferred into other spaces that's not really land-based. But land in South Africa has an emotional value as well. So that must be looked at. And if we look at what the ANC has done over the last 25 years, all of the land, or most of the land in a land reform or land redistribution program that they have taken away, they have actually used it to keep it for themselves. About 90% of land is owned by the government and hasn't been given to the people. So we are saying that land must be redistributed to the people and they must get title deeds. And that's the very important thing. The economy must grow so that people can have access to title deeds at the end of the day, and that they can actually use land then to build wealth and business. But to center the land in, or keep the land within the ownership of government, as the EFF wants, that is going to be suicidal for our economy going forward.
Okay, the EFF insists that it wants to come in, but we know you want to double or triple your vote this time round.
Yeah.
But please don't triple your speaking time.
Do you know that song?
I do know this.
Let me translate it for the white people. It says, allow the cowards to step back so that the brave ones can lead you. The reason these comrades don't talk about land is because them and these ones next to them have defrauded all of us as taxpayers through this land reform of the ANC. The land people, when people claim their land through the corrupt process that they've put in place, and they took it at gunpoint, they raped our great-great-grandmothers. That's why we have an entire colored population here today. They took our land at the blood and sweat of our forefathers. So there's no person who's going to get compensated beyond what has already been happening, because that compensation process has been happening to feed corruption between corrupt ANC politicians and the white people who already had the land. In fact, they had already benefited from the land. Let me also tell you a final thing on this land issue. You can laugh about it, Ramkhop, but tomorrow you'll be addressing a rally telling them how you're going to expropriate land without compensation. But when you come here and you see too many white people in the audience, you want to please these white people and tell them that, no, hey, this and that. Stop that. You must stop that. Because that is exactly the thing that led us not to vote with you in the metros in 2016, because the first condition we gave you when you came running to the EFF, Gwede and his friends there, when they came running to the EFF to say, we've hung the metros, now we need your vote, the first condition we gave you was agree to land expropriation without compensation now, remove Zuma, free quality education, all the things that we want, nationalization, etc. And you, the ANC, you turned all those conditions down that we gave you. You think we are joking and we're playing games here? There's 20 million poor black people out there, majority of them black women like myself and children and the youth. And you think we've got another 376 years or another 25 years to waste time lying to each other and misleading white people? White people are not going anywhere. They know very well that nothing is going to happen. We are simply going to expropriate land and redistribute it equitably so that we can industrialize, so that black people can have decent homes, so that black people can farm, so that black people can produce goods for themselves, so that black people can have ultimate dignity. And there's no white person here who doesn't want to see a black person prosper economically. But if they want to see black people not prosper economically and grow into poverty, then they will disagree with our policy.
Thanks, Melissa. Okay, we have exactly 10 minutes left, and I want to, sorry, Solly, but start with Mandisa again. We talk 10 minutes of coalition talks. Will you enter, if the ANC drops below 50% in Gauteng, with Comrade Ramakgopa that you've just attacked, will you enter with the ANC into a coalition in Gauteng if they drop below 50%? Very briefly.
Coalition discussions happen after election results. You cannot preempt those things. Number two, before we enter into any coalition discussion, they must know that we are going to invest a lot of resources building prisons for them, so that if we go into any coalition with anybody, the issue of dealing with corruption and taking the political heads first must be upfront on that coalition discussion.
To the DA, I want to ask, a recent poll by the Institute for Race Relations said that the majority of Gauteng voters prefer an ANC-EFF coalition to an ANC-DA coalition. Will the DA try to make itself attractive to the ANC as a coalition partner, Solly, so that the ANC can enter a coalition with the DA instead of with the EFF after the 8th of May?
Well, I can tell you in no uncertain terms that the DA doesn't want to be in the government just because we want to be in government, but we want to be in government so that we can improve people's lives. So it doesn't matter who we end up talking to. What matters is what is at the center of the people that we want to serve. So if you come and say, this is where we're going, this is the program of action that we are going to embark on, we'll talk to you. But right now, we're not concentrating on coalition. Nobody, I think, goes into a soccer match and say, well, I'm hoping that we draw and then we go to penalties. You go in there hoping that you win outright. But there are certain principles that I think we've put in place. But more importantly, there's one principle that I think we have learned, and we'll make that known in the short while, after being in coalition government, of things that you need to put up front for you to make sure that coalition governments do work. We've learned our lessons. There are things that are a complete no-no going forward, and we're going to make sure that we implement that.
Thank you. Mondli.
Okay, there's a question, but I'm going to plant it because I think we do need to go into the audience. If people can promise me, though, that they'll answer very concisely, and no last please. Yeah. No, I'll start with Solly, but others, whoever wants to come in can jump in. It's about immigration. It's about immigration. Yeah. There's no accurate figures about how many migrants are in this country, whether it's locals, or whether it's people from the continent, or from Bangladesh, or Pakistan, or whatever, but there are a lot on that, just from seeing. And this province is probably the place that attracts the most. Why I started with you is because the mayor of Johannesburg has been very vocal about the issue of undocumented migrants. But my question is, the migrants that are here, they are not going away. They are not returning to where they came from. They've come to make South Africa their home. How do we make sure that they become South Africans and regularize themselves as South Africans, if that is a desirable thing?
Well, let me put it to you this way. No country in the world, a successful country, has ever been able to succeed on its own brains, on its own back. So you look at America, it was built on the back of slaves and so on and so forth. So you always need people who are coming from outside to know how many people you have in your space. So all we're asking is that instead of the 15 platoons that we now have patrolling our borders, let's go back to having the 24 that used to be there. That's number one. So that you are able to then ensure that you are protecting your borders, but you are able to then monitor how many people are coming into your country. I'll give you another example.
But they are here already.
No, I'm coming to that. Go and read the history of Nigeria. Nigeria had an overpopulation, and I'm calling it overpopulation because that's what they called it. An overpopulation of Ghanaians that were living in Nigeria. They had to at some point say, it stops here, let's do an audit, and then those that qualify can remain. But those that don't qualify, in a humane manner, we need to make sure that they return to their countries of birth. Because you are then able to then say, what resources do I have? And will these resources be able to then cater for the people that I have, including everybody else? I'll give you another example. Right now you have a fire in Mooiplatz. Mooiplatz is now 65% people that are coming, undocumented foreign nationals, Mozambican, Zimbabweans, and people that are coming from Malawi. Now, when there's a fire there, he will tell you, tomorrow they wake up and say, no, build for me, build a house for me. But the South African law tells you cannot do that because you only can build for somebody that has a document to be in the country. So we now need to then say, who are the people that are here? Do they qualify to be here? And then from there, you're able to then take it forward. Charlotte Makhanya had to write off R1 billion just last year. Had to write off R1 billion because they couldn't trace the people who have used it. And you go and check what has been happening there. You find that the people that have been using the service are people who are not documented here. Now, out of 10 babies that are born in South Africa, or in Gauteng, 4 are babies that are born from foreign nationals. 3 of the 4 are undocumented. Is it sustainable? It's something that I think as South Africans we need to have a conversation on and say, how do we then deal with this matter going forward?
Maybe just to make the point, Mondli, I think you must have made an error. You meant illegal migrants. I'm telling you, it's a very nuanced but important distinction we must make. Because there's a tendency to criminalize migrants, especially those from the continent. And Solly is absolutely correct. Those who have studied how city region develops, how economies, cities develop, is that they benefit from the force of urbanization, migration, and globalization. So the concentration of skills is able to ensure that it propels you to even surpass the nation's sovereign state as a driver of the economy. So I thought we must make that distinction. So, and then the second one is that obviously the issue is about the porosity of the borders. So you need to be addressing the issue there, the porosity of borders. And then there are those that are here who are asylum seekers. Genuinely, they are running away from situations of conflict, and we have to house them here. We have an obligation to do that under international law. But I want us to caution against criminalization of migrants, especially those from the African continent. And we must have that honest conversation. These observations are correct, by the way. The proliferation of informal settlements, you'll find that in many of those, at least in Swan, we can compare the notes. The great majority is of African nationals from outside. And in fact, it happens that some of them have got genuine documents, and that points to corruption. I've made that admission at the beginning. It's something, it's a cancer that needs to be attended to, because it's going to undermine the economic prospects of this country, and in particular, of this city region that is Gauteng, because of its magnetic effects.
Mondli, I must add that the DA's stance is extremely racist. It's extremely anti-African, and it's extremely anti-black. And it's so sad that James Self and Helen Ziller and the real leaders of the DA come and, mess with the minds of our black brothers like so, and turn them into the anti-African, anti-black, racist black people they've become. He's correct, Ntate Ramkhopa. There's two things that need to be done with all immigrants. They need to be documented and registered. All of them, without fail. The way you get registered when you go into another country, even countries around us here. Secondly, all immigrants, starting with the Russians, the Czechs, the Europeans, the Americans, the Chinese, must have their fingerprints taken. We can't continue to live in a country in South Africa that has been supported for decades across the African continent for us to get the little bit of freedom we have now. Because, by the way, the EFF acknowledges the political freedom that was delivered by Winnie Mandela, that was delivered by Chris Hani, that was delivered by Nelson Mandela, that was delivered by O.R. Tambo. We acknowledge that. We do not disown that. We can't. What kind of disrespectful black kids would we be? But this anti-black racist attitude by the DA, we can't tolerate it anymore, because it is continuing to be a danger for international relations here in Africa. For us to have robust relations with our fellow African states, for us to push an economic freedom struggle. By the way, the EFF struggle is not about South Africa alone. Our struggle is the African struggle. So as long as we document our migrants, we know exactly where they are, why they are here, and we understand that the larger struggle is to liberate our immediate neighbors so that we reduce this dependency on South Africa economically and fight the conflicts and convert and radicalize the AU so that it becomes a respectable institution. That is the agenda that we are pushing. We're not going to allow daily frustrations to drive us towards anti-African sentiments and racist behavior by white people. We won't allow that.
Thank you, EFF. Last word then to Freedom Front Plus and IFP, and then we go to the floor. Thanks.
Thank you very much. It's quite interesting that we're talking about this and that the EFF is defending migrants, but if we look at Zimbabwe, the reason why those people are fleeing into South Africa, and many of them highly skilled people who can't find jobs, are coming to South Africa and are doing menial work while they're degreed individuals. And that is because of the economic policies of Mugabe and the government of Zimbabwe that has appropriated farms and land without compensation, and now we have an imploded economy in Zimbabwe. You speak to any Zimbabwean on the street and you ask them, sir, do you want to stay here or do you want to go back? He says, I'll go back anytime if they fix the economy, if I have an opportunity there. So we will fix many problems if South Africa plays a much more harder role strategically in SADC. The ANC dismantled the SADC tribunal that was supposed to hold Mugabe accountable. We must bring that back, and we must make sure that we put pressure on our partners outside of the country, our SADC brothers and sisters, And we must ensure that they implement policies that will work and grow so that the whole SADC and Southern African region can grow. And people who feel that they are here because they have to flee, are then free to go back to their home countries.
Thank you. Last word then to the IFP and then questions from the audience.
I think I agree with some of the panelists that they are now some of them are now a reality in South Africa that will not move out. But one, they must be registered and regulated. And those who don't want to be regulated, we must deal with them. We must, one, empower the immigration unit in the Department of Home Affairs and make sure that we build more immigration centers, not just one or two in the country, so that we're able to deal with them swiftly, because there are those who are running away from really genuine situation in their countries. But we cannot have a situation where in our country we have people who are undocumented, and not especially given the high rate of crime that we are in. So as the IFP was saying, yes, they are a reality, they are here. Every economy that needs to grow, it needs other brains and other skills and other nationalities, like other big cities you've got. So, I mean, Gauteng, for instance, it's a cosmopolitan area where it's a melting pot of all the cultures, including our brothers in Africa. But we cannot have a situation where we've got unruliness, where you've got people even undocumented people hijacking even buildings in our inner cities. I think that is not acceptable.
For questions from the audience now, we'll take 3 at a time and try to make it equitable, and then another round. Please keep your question. Thank you. Just please introduce yourself. Thank you very much. Second question, also directed at a specific member of the panel, please. Thanks. Preferably not, no.
Focused on the biggest challenge that humanity has faced in its entire history. The International Panel for Climate Change has said that we have 11 years to prevent climate catastrophe. Thanks. We have 11 years to prevent climate catastrophe. The issue of land reform is meaningless when the land is useless because of drought. The issue of immigration is nothing compared to what we will face because of climate refugees. And every issue that we've talked about today will seem like hard today when we are in a situation like Mozambique is in now. So how will your government react to climate change? That's my question.
Thank you very much. Your name? Matthew. Okay, Matthew, thank you. Third question at the back.
My name is Peter Lee. I have a question for Ms. Mashego. Ma'am, you've probably had the most passionate anti-corruption stance, especially with regards to the ANC's corruption stance tonight. But your own party and its top leaders, Mr. Julius Waldimar, Mr. Brian Shibambo, Mr. Floyd Shibambo, are embroiled in the most shocking corruption scandal of late, the VPS looting. Can you please tell the public how you reconcile your anti-corruption stance with the looting of your own party's top leaders, and how you can assure the public that your land redistribution program won't become subjected to the same wanton looting by your party's top leaders? Thank you.
Thank you. Mandisa, will you take question number 1 and 3 in your answer, and then we handle them together? Thank you, Mandisa.
Yeah. That's the easiest question to deal with. We have repeatedly said, go and prosecute. If you think Mandisa has stolen, investigate and prosecute her and throw her in jail. But you must start with the ANC mayors here in West Rand, who looted in excess of 300 million rand from Rand West Municipality and Merafong in 2015 and 2016, and gave it to the VBS Bank outside of an investment policy of the municipality. And I'm only confining myself to the ones here in Gauteng. 300 million. I don't want to talk about the ones in Limpopo. In excess of 2 billion rand, the ANC has looted from poor people in the VBS. If anybody in the EFF is found guilty and anyone has evidence to that effect, they must take that evidence to the police must investigate and take that case urgently to the NPA and prosecute. The EFF has never been part of any corruption, and I wish people can stop trying to posture this VBS thing as an EFF problem. It's not an EFF problem. If you have the evidence, go and give it to the police and prosecute, and pay back the 2 billion rand from the ANC that they've looted from VBS. I'm more interested in the question that Zipporah asked, and it's a very progressive question because we've stated it, that when we are governing, where we will govern, let's start with the jobs that we'll be in control of through the state and state-owned companies. No less than 50% of those jobs, that's the first empowerment policy, will go to black women and the youth. Very clearly stated, and we include the LGBTI actually in that framework, and we include people living with disabilities for obvious reasons, because they've been left out by and large. The LGBTQI sector is basically invisible to the ANC right now in terms of their policies. So that is the first thing that we're going to correct, nothing less than 50%. Number two, the JSE, all companies listed in the JSE, no less than 30% of their shareholding must go to black women and youth, and that includes the LGBTQI as well as people living with disability. Let me come to local economic development. All companies operating, whether through retail entities, property entities, other commercial entities, manufacturing, industrial entities, will be forced to procure no less than 50% of their spend to black women and youth-owned companies. That's just to mention a few.
Thank you very much. The question number 2 was directed to the ANC about climate change.
I feel compelled that, as by the way, that when it comes to ANC, you must lock them up. When it comes to EFF, bring the evidence. No, we're locking up everyone. We lock up everyone.
Yes, we must bring the
evidence. But let me come to the point. You remember we championed the Conference of Parties, COP14, I think, when we were in Devon. And in fact, the late minister, Edna Molewa, championed that, if you like. So we are making a number of interventions. The first one is the issues around the energy mix. Although we advocated for equal but differentiated responsibilities. Remember, the reason why we're advocating for that is that there's a glut of coal, and in fact, we need to exploit it to ensure that there's no energy hunger. But we think that we still have a responsibility to ensure that we reduce the emission levels to below 2 degrees Celsius. I'm just saying its impact. I'm not sure that you have read the latest report of the IPCC as a result of the withdrawal of the US and the other parties to the treaty not keeping to their commitments, that in fact we are likely going to surpass the 2 degrees Celsius. That in fact has been the yardstick. What is it that we are doing? Issues around energy mix to ensure that there's a greater proportion that is drawn from renewable. I'm talking of wind, I'm talking of solar. The second one is to ensure that we migrate people from private car usage to public transport. In Tshwane, we spearheaded LNG-propelled buses in Tshwane, and then that's in fact a project that continues now, so that we are able to, once we have a reliable, effective, safe, and efficient public transport, we are able to penalize private car usage and you migrate people to public transport. Obviously, we must get PRASA right and many of the public transport. And then the last one is the reconfiguration of the space. So a study that was done some time back reveals that a great majority of the poor spend a great proportion of their time traveling. So some of them, to access employment opportunities, they have to travel up to 150 kilometers. So you need to densify, you need to maximize the airspace so that people can walk and cycle to work, and those are some of the commitments. But the manifesto is extremely comprehensive with regards to our commitments.
Thank you very much. Let's take a round of 5 questions. This time, so many hands. I'm going to start on this side. In the second row here, number 1. In the 4th row there, number 2. Thank you very much. Number 3, the gentleman there. Thank you. Number 4, thank you very much. Oh, sorry, Mondli, you choose. and number 5 in the front row. Thank you very much. I'll do more of that side in the second round. Okay, the first question was here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I am Yola Mafuna.
Sorry, can you speak up? I think there is just, try again.
I am Yola Mafuna from the University of Johannesburg. And I want to direct my question to Mr. Ramakgopo. It is about education. I want to know how you intend to make the NSFAS institution more efficient so as to make the whole free education policy more efficient. And the second part of the question is about the secondary education. I want to know how you plan to take the good work of the MEC of Education, Comrade Banyaza Lissofi, that has been doing in terms of skills development and targeting the missing skills in the region of Johannesburg and making that good program from the province of Gauteng to a national issue. And thirdly, funding for postgraduate students through NSFAS. How is that going to be made more accessible and equitable? Thank you.
Jonah, thank you very much. The second one was in the 4th row here. Thank you. Is there a mic still? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I just need to ask the IFP. My name is Matthew Skosana. I need to ask the IFP in terms of the policy, their policies when it comes to education. You go to schools, you see now children fighting with teachers, stepping teachers, and in some instances they're killing teachers. I need to understand what is the principle or the principle in terms of the IFP, in terms of making sure that our education system is proper and it's direct to the market system. I also need to, the second one is that I need to know from Mr. Dlamini, can you break for us the issue in terms of the governance, provincial governance, how it works? What is the stance of the IFP? If you govern, what are you going to do to make sure all the entities within the governance sphere will work accordingly, and it will make sure that service delivery, it is reached to the local? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's keep it to one question each, please. Over there. Thank you.
Is the Freedom Front open for all people of South Africa? And then our association with UMPO, if you can just elaborate on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 4 was just across the aisle. Thank you. And then number 5, I think Mondli should select the next 5.
No, you can see better than I can.
Oh, okay. Right. Thank you very much. Question number 4.
If the IFF will be in charge, or the ANC will be in charge, say, the 1st of June, for argument's sake, will they come and take my factory? Will they come and take my land? Kick my butt? Or why must I every time hear African people? What am I? Am I African or am I rubbish? That's what I want to know. I'm a white African. Why always referring, if you talk my people, our people, why are we, the white farmer, the white businessman, excluded in a conversation? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last question of this round, number 5.
Thank you very much. My name is Waldimar, EFF. Firstly, the EFF continues to proud itself by being the champions in defending our constitutional democracy. Moreover, defending the interests of the majority people of this country.
No speeches.
I needed to get to this because it's clear that our panelists are confused, except for Mondli Samashe. I think what she needs to do is to further clarify who will be the first beneficiaries after expropriation of land. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that was an EFF clarifier question from the EFF to the EFF. Okay. Question number 1 was directed at the ANC by Jonah from UJ about education. Thank you.
Yeah, so if you, 1994, I think the allocation we're giving to post-secondary institutions of higher learning students was about 70 million. Now we're at 15 billion rand. So you can see it has been an exponential rise. So that's our commitment to ensuring that there's free education in our lifetime. So the issue has been the administration of the fund. So the fund is available, but you find that when you register, you are approved. The institution tells you that, but we are still waiting for the money. So I think there needs to be a greater efficiency in the management of the fund. And I'm sure you have seen the Minister of Higher Education has made significant changes at an executive level of the people who are administering the fund itself. And remember that we said the fund will be progressive. When I started, I said we are close to ensuring that higher education is free. We are not yet there, because when you go to post-secondary level, you still are expected to pay. So we think that over a passage of time, we should make it free across, especially around designated qualifications, those that the market is ready to absorb. Those are going to almost contribute directly to the growth of the economy going forward. And yes, I think Comrade Panyaza is emblematic of the kind of MEC you want to see in education. Visionary, futuristic, very progressive, and that's a template that I think the ANC government post the 8th of May is going to export to other provinces across the country.
Thank you very much. The next question was from Matthew, directed to the IFP, also about education and provincial government.
Yeah, I mean, as the IFP, we've got a good track record when it comes to education. One, we need to create an environment at school level, especially primary school level, of teaching and learning, and bring back the values of discipline and respect for teachers. We need to professionalize again and bring dignity to the teaching profession. It has been vandalized by being unionized and not being professionalized and being paid better. Therefore, we're going to do that. Secondly, we're going to make sure that there is more engagement and involvement of parents, more especially in public schools. The level of engagement of parents that we see in private schools, we want to enhance to make sure that it gets there. Don't politicize it. Make sure that parents and communities own schools, because the progress that has been made in terms of, more especially in digitalizing our schools, it is the problem of theft and so forth. The communities have a right, to do that. Secondly, the IFP is pragmatic to say we need to deal with your early childhood development education. You get that right, professionalize that. Even teachers who are at that level must be professionalized and be paid better like all other teachers. Once you get it right at early education, you are likely not to get dropouts at grade 12, and therefore increase the number of graduates that we will produce. And therefore, also our curriculum must be in such a way that it produces people who are matching the needs of our economy, because currently we've got a mismatch of what we produce and what our economy needs.
Thank you very much. Next question was to the Freedom Front Plus, I suspect also from the Freedom Front Plus, about whether the party is open to all.
Yeah, the Freedom Front Plus is a party with Christian values, and its policies aligned with international law and international human rights law. That's also directed in protecting minorities. And our mandate is to try and protect minorities in South Africa. And we have many types of minorities who join us from various backgrounds. It's quite important that we do this to create a balance of power in South Africa, because we do see attacks from the ANC based on policy and practice that sidelines minorities to a great degree and alienates minorities, especially among the white and colored communities, but increasingly also the Indian communities. And we also see the open attacks from the EFF against those people, and leading to the question that the one gentleman asked, whether he is rubbish or whether he is safe in South Africa. That is how EFF makes people feel from a minority background in South Africa. That also led us to become a member of UNPO. UNPO means the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization. It's like United Nations for people who do not have their own state, many minorities and stateless people. And they have sitting in the United Nations as well. And they are also sanctioned by United Nations. And we participate through them in the United Nations work to protect minorities and to make the world aware if minorities are being oppressed or stand danger of being harmed in some way. Some of our members of the minorities are here today. We have a Jewish member here, Sidney Anderlik, tonight. He's from the old Zeeland-Soesman constituency of Gauteng. And we are planning in 2021 to take that constituency in the local government elections with him. We also have many people from the Khoi and San communities. And it's quite important that we represent them because nobody speaks on their behalf in Parliament. It's only us who does that. And if the EFF wants to take any land, they actually should ask them for permission first because they are the first people in South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask the EFF candidate to address Don directly, the fourth question? Thank you.
That didn't have borders before 1868 or in the 1600s. So I'm not sure how you determine which African owns what. The problem with white people like you is that you are extremely paternalistic over and above being racist. And you are a very dangerous person in South Africa because in the process of building this country and delivering economic freedom for all, your kind really should be attended to with kid gloves, really, because you are fragile over and above that, and your paranoia is going to hurt you. Let me respond to the gentleman. If you have a factory or a house or whatever you have, and we expropriate land, it's everybody's land that will be expropriated, not yours alone. So let's not think in a paranoid, self-obsessed way. Everything is about me and me alone. Everybody's land will be expropriated and taken into state custodianship, not your house, not your factory. But I also want to allay your fears a little bit. We said earlier that people like yourself will be offered tax-free economic zones to operate in if you are genuinely producing product here and not importing things from China, because we want to create jobs. But there'll be conditions that we will give you. Conditions in terms of how your labor relations should be, minimum 2,000 people must be employed, etc., etc. In fact, it will be easier for you to expand your business if you're a manufacturer because we want to industrialize. Let me come to the question about the first people to benefit from land expropriation without compensation. First and foremost will be women. Why? Black women in particular, because they are the most land insecure people in this country. And black women in the main are raising children, are looking after extended families, and are either stuck with this corrupt process of allocation of RDP houses, which they end up never getting. They are stuck with C-forms, or they are stuck with bonds where they end up getting, the houses get repossessed from them because they can't afford to pay or they can't sustain their jobs. And so that residential property aspect of land redistribution will prioritize black women in particular, especially those in the rural areas and in the outer skirts of Gauteng, and of course women that are South African women who are in the informal settlements and places like Alexandra, in terms of relieving the living conditions pressure in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're running out of time, ladies and gentlemen. We want to give each member of the panel just a short opportunity to make a short closing statement. Mondli, more questions, or it's 8:15? Shall we wrap up, or do you think we should take?
Is there something burning? Okay, very last round. That's fine.
Okay, let's take 3. We don't have more time for that. And please limit the questions from members of parties, members of the public, please. Yeah, Okay. Fair enough. Okay, let the DA have one question in the front here. And then how should we do this? In front here, please, number 2. And at the back there, number 3. Thank you. So it's 1, 2, 3. In the front here first, thank you. Mark in the front, thank you very much. Please direct it at a specific...
Yeah, very quick one. The Premier in waiting, so Lemsima, what we have observed is lack of consequences for people who do wrong. Either it's looting government resources or negligence. We've seen life as demand. No one is arrested as we speak. We see people, reported to have been corrupt. What are you going to do with people who actually do something wrong, and then taxpayers are the ones footing the bill? So what then becomes your plan after the 8th of May?
Thank you very much. The second question was in the second, over here. Sorry about that. Thank you.
This is Lidni Wedlamini from the IFP. Firstly, I would like to tell the people of South Africa to wake up. The ANC, like the RDP houses, the social grants, and the SOEs, the health system, the education system is not funded by the ANC. The people of South Africa must know that this is funded from their taxpayers' money. Which is the ANC pinching from the taxpayers' money? My question is for the IFP Uguti. How are you going to improve the quality of life for the people of which are hostel dealers and informal settlements?
Thank you very much. Is there another question from a member of the public here? I'm seeing a journalist at the back, but no party members, please. We've had enough of them. Second row there, thank you very much. Question number 3. And a fourth question for this round. On this side, no journalists, no party members.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's then start the second question over there. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would actually love my question to go to three parties, if that's allowable, which will be to the DA, the ANC, and the EFF. The DA is currently running Johannesburg in a coalition sort of setup with the EFF being kingmakers. ANC had Johannesburg. They've proved they cannot run the municipality. The EFF and ANC has been working together in that municipality to make your life difficult. Is it worth it for the DA to go into a coalition with any other parties and sit in a situation where you are sitting in Johannesburg, where you cannot appoint who you want to appoint to run positions, where you cannot fire who needs to be fired that are corrupt, and that the citizens of this province will have to suffer the same fate as the Joburg residents are currently doing because of the EFF, the ANC making the life difficult for the actual corruption to be taken out of council? Is it worth it to go into a coalition for you as a party and look at the EFF and even at the ANC to say, listen here, we'll work together, but yet us as citizens, we're the ones that's going to suffer at the end of the day. That's what we're doing now.
Okay, thank you. And then last question for this round.
Thank you very much. My name is Musi. I'm from Kliptown. I just want to clarify one thing, that people should remember that a Zondo Commission is not a court of law, so it needs still to be done. So I've been following up the news most recently, especially in relation to what is happening in Alexandra. I'm very worried about that, and then to me it's like it is an engineering political stance by some political parties. So to me, the question goes to the EFF, the IFP in itself. What has happened to the Alexandra Renewal Project funds, which maybe if it was allocated, actually to the ANC, not the EFF. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then we're done. The first question was to the DA. Yeah, the first question was to the DA. Thank you.
I think there's two questions that have been posed to ourselves. I think, one, we need to move away where public officials are actually promoted instead of punished when they have done wrong. One thing that we are promising is that there will be an introduction of a 15-year jail sentence when when we come into government. Number two is that we are talking about having a commission of inquiry into state capture into Gauteng, because we've seen that there's quite a lot that still need to be unraveled. I'll give you a typical example. The involvement of Busasa companies in Gauteng alone has grown by 300% in the last 5 years. So that tells you that there is some serious investigation that needs to take place, and we are going to make sure that people are punished for that. But also we are saying that people must also be financially held responsible. It cannot be that now we'll be paying over 200 million for the Life City money, and people like Tane Mahlangu and those that other officials are going to walk scot-free. Somebody must be able to account for the financial mess that this has led to. I think the second question that the gentleman was asked is about coalition. As I said earlier on, there's great lessons that we've learned in terms of putting coalition governments together, and how do you then hold each other accountable? It cannot be that you want to be in government when it suits you and not out of government when it doesn't suit you. Reading between the lines in what I'm saying, and I think you'll get the answer from there.
Thank you very much. And then the IFP, very briefly, please, both questions together, Vusi's question and the first question from your party.
The Alexander problem, let alone the 7 billion that went to the ANC through its corruption. The Alexander problem, it must be a lesson to all South Africans. Because on the eve of our democracy, the ANC and SALCO were encouraging illegal occupation of land and of mushroom of shacks inside Alexander, putting tenants visas the landowners. Hence, you can't develop Alexander today. What is now being encouraged in other areas by other parties is going to catch up with us. But we have now seen that people are creating problems deliberately so that when they run out of steam politically and corruption, then they tap into those problems and create voter foders. That's what is happening now in Alexandra. A problem that was created by the ANC is now blaming others for it. And we know that 10 years down the line, others who are creating the same Alexandras in other areas, what is going to happen. The last question is that the IFP is not ashamed of talking for people that live in hostels, because hostels are a result of a brutal system of apartheid, which was in fact controlling black people not to stay and own in their areas. So it is a shame that after 25 years of democracy, you still have people who are treated unequally by their own government. Therefore, the IFP is not ashamed to associate and talk on their behalf and make sure. That is why we even changed the ANC stance when they wanted to create rental stock for hostel people, to say no, they also qualify for RTP hookups. Build RTP house for them like you do for all people.
Thank you very much. We have 1 minute per party, starting with the biggest party in the Gauteng legislature. Which one thing do you want these voters to remember from tonight? ANC, DA, EFF, Freedom Front, and IFP, starting with the ANC.
I think earlier on you asked a question about the desire to form coalitions. And for obvious reasons, I think you had a premonition. You didn't ask me that question because you know what the numbers are saying. But the point I'm making is... on a more serious note, I think we are confident, almost bullish about the prospects. We think that President Ramaphosa is an emblematic figure who represents the values that the ANC wants to espouse going forward. We are committed to ensuring that we are going to qualitatively change the lives of our people, and together we are going to take South Africa forward across all races, across all class groups. So we are confident, and good luck to the fellow panelists.
José Ramaphosa from the ANC, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Solomon Simanga from the DA.
Well, I think the reality of South African politics, and you can see by the numbers since 2004, is actually moving closer towards coalition governments and all of that. So I think it's something that you're going to need to live with, my friend, whether you like it or not. But here's the issue. We have put governments that have been accountable. We've put governments that have been able to turn certain things around, and we want to continue doing that. If you want an accountable government that is able to put jobs in every home, that is able to then ensure that the economy is growing, that is able to ensure that the education of any South African, and that is able to ensure that we unite all South Africans instead of dividing people on race, instead of dividing people, you know, in terms of, economic background. The DA is the party that will be able to then do that. And we are asking for you to vote for us on the 8th of May to continue with the good work.
Solomon Simanga from the DA, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. EFF.
We're going to liberate workers from slavery. We're going to remove labor brokers. We're gradually going to do away with the corruptible and corrupt tender system. Over and above the land expropriation issue, which everybody, I think, is becoming clearer and clearer of by the day. We're going to industrialize. But more than anything, Gauteng citizens must understand, and I think Ramkhopa mentioned it a little bit earlier, but forgot to come to the point. This province needs to be depopularized. We need to have a decentralized economic framework nationally, which is what the EFF is going to do. In all the other 8 provinces. We're going to specialize, we're going to create the special economic zones much more aggressively than here in Gauteng, so that we have jobs in the rural areas. Limpopo, Northwest, for instance, can do it. Mpumalanga can do it. They've got a lot of mining activities, a lot of minerals, and currently jobs are not being extrapolated out of our natural and mineral resources because they're going to downstream private businesses who are profiteering out of it instead of creating jobs.
Mondli Samashego from the EFF, thank you very much. Freedom Front Plus.
The Freedom Front Plus want to give the people of Gauteng a message of hope. We know that the ANC is below 50% and they will remain that way. It will even get worse for them, we think. And so therefore a coalition government is a possibility, and we will participate in a coalition government without the EFF. Otherwise we will stay in opposition. But our policies will give hope to South Africans because they will create opportunities for job creation and safety, and they will ensure that our schooling system is fixed and that the dangers of the Sufi and his wars against schools are ended finally, and that people of Gauteng have a hope for the future.
Thank you, Anton Albrecht from the Freedom Front Plus. Thank you very much. Bonginkosi Dlamini from the IFP. Thank you.
On the 8th of May, all of us South Africans will be equal because a voter of a poor man and the rich man will be equal. Therefore, use that power to fire those who are corrupt and hire those that you can trust, because you can trust the IFP to fix the economy, you can trust the IFP to fix education, you can trust the IFP to look after your public purse, our record speaks for itself. We are in a coalition government currently in Johannesburg. That is why we're saying we're worried about the fast learning of other of our colleagues in corruption. We will not tolerate that. You can only trust the IFP is the part that you can trust in making sure that Gauteng, as the 5th largest economy in Africa, is in the right hands.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in thanking the panel. The last word went to the IFP, but the second last word will go to me, and then the final word I will ask Mondli to close the evening. Just on a logistical note, please join us outside. There are food trucks there. The food is not sponsored by any political party. You'll be happy to know. But thank you very much for joining us tonight, and please keep your eyes open for future events. And if I can please ask my colleague Mondli to say just a closing word for tonight.
Yeah. Lastly, yeah, there's a question I wanted to ask, but this question would only be understood by the people in the front row, unfortunately, is whether it's a criteria for Tshwane mayors to have to wear smart socks. Yeah, really, just to say thank you again to the political parties, to the political leaders here. There were so many other issues that we wish to have delved into. Like if there was a lot more time, look, we did touch on education, we did touch on health, we did touch, e-tolls was not touched upon, which is something that I'm sure Sputler would not have liked us to touch on. But I mean, like, we would have loved to have gone so much deeper into those issues, because health and education and crime and so on are issues that are very much hot issues in our province. Just to say thank you to all of you for being here, and to once more affirm that I think as we walk out of here and go home, to say that let us appreciate the fact that we live in this democracy, and it's a democracy that will live forever. And, yeah, thank you.